Good day. Thank you for joining us for today's news. If you find this helpful, please consider subscribing. We're here every day with calm, clear updates, just for you.
In a major development for mental health services in New Zealand, Gumboot Friday has been granted continued government funding through 2026. This initiative, founded by mental health and advocate My King, has already 10,000 young New Zealanders. The funding, which amounts to $24 million over 4 years, has already deferred. Mental Health Minister Matt Ducey praised the program for its ability to get young people into counseling quickly, often within just a few days, despite controversy over King's comments on alcohol. The government has committed to supporting the initiative. However, the funding process faced scrutiny from the Auditor General, who criticized the unusual entry. Looking ahead, Gumboot Friday plans to scale up its operations and reach even more young people in need of mental health assistance. This continued support highlights the government's commitment to addressing mental health challenges among New Zealand's youth.
On December the 22nd, 2023, 70-year-old Angel Riley lost her life in a police pursuit in Whangarei, New Zealand. The incident began when Angel turned around near a police checkpoint, prompting a police officer to pursue her. Minutes later, her car crashed into a tree. Now the officer has been charged with dangerous driving, causing death. Angel's mother, Malie Munro, described her daughter as a brave and ambitious young woman. With dreams of joining the army and a passion for boxing, she had traveled extensively as a child. Her family says she had a bright future ahead of her, but that future was stolen in an instant. The tragedy has left the community in shock and sparked a broader conversation on the need for accountability as the legal process on the community continue to seek justice and reflection on how such incidents can be prevented.
In the quiet suburb of Parklands in Christchurch, a shocking incident unfolded late last night that has left the community in disbelief. A 36-year-old man has been charged with murder after the death of a woman whose body was found at the scene of the crime emerged 7:50 p.m., where they discovered the woman unresponsive. It's alleged she was stabbed before police arrived. A man was taken into custody shortly after and charged with murder. Police have cordoned off several streets with a blues specialist tent set up on Lamorna RD as they conduct their investigation. Neighbor expressed their shock, saying they never expected such a tragedy. The man is said to appear in court next month, but for now the community is left reeling from the loss. Detectives are working closely with the victim's family and have assured residents there's no risk to the wider community as the investigation continues.
In a nostalgic and sharp-witted move, David Letterman has responded to the news that Stephen Colbert's The Late Show will end in 2026. Letterman shared a video montage of his past roasts of CBS, the network that once employed him, highlighting his long-standing relationship. The timing of the video seemed to be a direct reaction to the cancellation news, which came amid ongoing discussions about CBS's financial situation. Paramount Colbert, who took over the show from Letterman in 2014, has been a close friend and collaborator with his predecessor, and the two have remained on good terms despite the news. Fellow comedians like Jon Stewart, John Oliver, Seth Meyers, and Jimmy Fallon have rallied around Colbert. Appearing as guests on his show in a show of solidarity, Colbert himself addressed the news during his monologue, saying the show's cancellation doesn't necessarily solve. As The Late Show with Stephen Colbert approaches its final months, the comedy world is watching closely to see how Colbert will wrap up his tenure and what the future holds for the show and the network.
New Zealand's energy crisis is reaching a boiling point, with experts warning that current reforms are only scratching the surface of the problem. The electricity market, described as broken, is driving up living costs, with over 30% of households dry year in 2024, and declining gas and wind supplies have lagged year in twice. Poor housing, rising line charges, and the phase-out of low fixed daily charges are all contributing to the crisis, particularly affecting low-income family, while new rules require retailers to often stress the need for compress emphasis, stress the need for compress emphasis in Percy. The challenge ahead is clear: Energy reform must go beyond cheaper off-peak power to ensure that New Zealanders can live in warm, healthy homes without sacrificing their financial stability.
In a groundbreaking decision, the International Court of Justice has declared that countries have a legal obligation to address climate change, potentially paving the way for reparations to be claimed by nations most affected by global warming, carries a pivotal moment in the global climate justice movement. The court described climate change as an urgent and existential threat, emphasizing the need for all nations to take action to prevent harm from greenhouse gas emissions. The ruling was prompted by a case led by Pacific Island nations, including Vanuatu, which have long been on the front lines of the climate crisis. The court was asked two critical questions. What must states do under international law to protect the environment from emissions, and what are the consequences for nations whose emissions drop core? Legal experts have hailed the ruling as a catalyst for accelerated climate action and unprecedented accountability. The case, the largest in the court's history, was initiated by the lack of accountability for the damage afflicting their homelands. The ruling has reignited the role of courts in climatic states and could serve as a palliative. As the world moves forward, the ICJ's decision may serve as a turning point in the fight for climate justice, ensuring that vulnerable nations are not left behind in the global response to the climate crisis.
In a landmark ruling, the United Nations highest court has determined that countries can be held legally responsible for their greenhouse gas emissions. This decision, delivered by the International Court of Justice, comes after years of advocacy by Pacific Island nations and university students. The court emphasized that climate change is an urgent and existential threat, with consequences that cross borders. It found that states have clear obligations under international law to curb emissions, extending beyond the Paris Agreement to include human rights and environmental law. The ruling is not legally barred. For Pacific Island nations, the decision is a major victory, empowering them in future climate negotiations and reaffirming the power of multilateralism. As the world faces the escalating impacts of climate change, this ruling marks a pivotal moment in the global effort to hold governance communities.
In a ground-reigning decision, the International Court of Justice has ruled that countries must take urgent action to combat climate change. This landmark opinion, delivered by the UN's highest court, marks a turning point in the global fight of a legal and moral obligation to reduce greenhouse gas. Failure to do so, the court said, could lead to legal action by countries affected by climate change. This decision is a major victory for small island and low-lying states who have long called for stronger climate action. The court also recognized the human right to a clean, healthy, and states. While the ruling is not legally binding, it carries significant political and legal weight, potentially reshaping future classes. Start of a new era of global climate accountability. The opinion comes after a 2-week hearing at the ICJ, where the court was asked to consider the legal obligations of countries. The ruling is expected to influence future climate policies and litigation around the world as activists and governments face mounting pressure to take meaningful action on the climate crisis.
A wave of icy conditions swept through southern New Zealand on Thursday morning, causing multiple road crashes and forcing schools to delay their start times. Fire and Emergency New Zealand reported responding to 3 incidents before 6:30 a.m., with temperatures plunging into the negatives in parts of the South Island and Lower North Island. In Dunedin, icy roads affected hill suburbs for the second consecutive day, leading to the postponement of school hours. Emergency services warned that ice was widespread and could remain a hazard well into the morning. Drivers were urged to slow down, keep a safe distance, and use headlights to navigate. Police confirmed no serious injuries were reported, but the message was clear: stay cautious and prioritize safety on the roads. As temperatures remain low, communities across the South Island are bracing for more challenges ahead.
In a recent parole hearing, Raymond Wahiaratima, the man responsible for the 1992 Masterton massacre that left 7 people dead, was once again denied parole. This time, it was the 16th denial since his sentencing. Igniting Knight expressed deep remorse for his actions. He admitted that his decision to kill was driven by a selfish desire to prevent the victims from being with anyone else after a bitter relationship breakdown. Ratama spoke emotionally about the lives he took, including his own children, and reflected on his hopes for a better future for his family. The Paro board, while noting his good conduct in prison, remains firm in its decision, with victims' families opposing any possibility of his release. Ratima will next appear before the board in January 2026, with the possibility of reapplying for parole in 6 months.
That's all for today's news. We appreciate your time. If you enjoyed this update, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us keep going.